This is Festival 77, only on 11, WTTW Chicago.
Terror of the Autons is one of those stories that I absolutely love, and that goes well beyond, my love that is, for the story goes well beyond just the fact that it's a great story that introduces a new character called the Master, introduces Joe Grant, introduces Captain Yates. I mean, there's a lot of great things about the story, but what I really love about it, and kind of where my love for Doctor Who lies, is in the fact that this story has, and along with a number of other stories, had kind of gone through some sort of, sort of a miracle of restoration that back when I started watching Doctor Who seemed absolutely impossible. And so when I talk about these releases, and I start talking about some of these that have these amazing restoration pieces to it, I get really excited and I get very nostalgic for it, because this was something, what we have now is like what I dreamed that we would have had. And I know a number of you would be the same way, what you dreamed to have back in the late 80s, early 90s. And for some of you beforehand, because my God, some of you have been watching the show for far too long. But I'm really excited about it, and I really absolutely love talking about it. In fact, it sounds odd, almost more than Doctor Who itself. The story of how these episodes exist in terms of the formats, where they were found, how they were kind of recreated to create something that's close to broadcast quality, that is actually something I find almost more interesting than the stories itself. I don't know if I'd be as big of a Doctor Who fan if every single episode existed. Honestly, isn't that something? Once again, I want to just remind people that I'm talking about these wonderful VHSs, and I'm talking about what they meant to me beyond just the fact that they were on VHS now and Blu-ray and all these other formats. I just want to let you know that I'm going to go through some of the history of it, some of the history of the restoration. Once again, I may get stuff wrong, and if I do, send me a very polite email letting me know if I got some of the facts wrong. And thank you to all of you who watched my original video on the Tomb of the Cybermen. It was a lot of fun to make, and I was really overwhelmed by the reaction to it. And I was really happy to see that there is a space for this type of discussion. And so many of you had shared your personal experiences about getting that release. And I think for a lot of us, Tomb of the Cybermen was kind of a big point in our collecting of these stories, of any Doctor Who story that has stayed with us for all these years. And not to say that Terror of the Autons is going to be on that level, but I think the story behind Terror of the Autons is one that is super interesting. And, I find it very fascinating with the restoration side of it. Now, first of all, the VHS for the Terror of the Autons, the first story of Season 8, the second season of John Pertwee. We got through Season 7, which in itself is so different than what's to come. Both, in my opinion, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But when I was watching this on KTCA on Channel 2 in the Twin Cities, this was black and white. This story was black and white. In fact, in March of 1985, the first John Pertwee story aired in my market, in the Twin Cities market. That's in Minnesota. And it was a regeneration night. And that was their way to introduce us to John Pertwee. At that point, that was the furthest back we've gotten in the series. And that was mind-blowing to me. And at that point, I didn't expect that we would ever see any Hartnell or Troutons. I just didn't think, why would we go back that far? There's no need for that. Little did I realize at the time that in 1985, when the John Pertwee package of episodes was, and it's the second John Pertwee package of episodes, we'll talk about that in a second, though you all know what I'm talking about. When that package was released, little did I realize that the Hartnell and Trouton stories were already out and about in other parts of the United States. And that was, I thought that we'd never see anything about that. So much to talk about, isn't there? So many memories, so many things that we can really talk about here. But let's try to keep it right now on Pertwee. And so they had a regeneration night. And so what they showed was Spirit from Space. They showed Robot. They showed Logopolis. Robot and Logopolis was truncated at that point because they just didn't have the time to show it all. So they're kind of special edits that I believe KTCA did to kind of bring it down. And I think they might have just shown, like, for Logopolis, they might have shown just parts 3 and 4. I'm not quite sure. That was a long time ago. And then they ended with The Caves of Androzani. At that point, Colin Baker had not debuted in the Twin Cities as of yet. So Spirit from Space is shot on 16 millimeter color film. And immediately watching it, even as an 11-year-old boy, I could tell that this was very different. I mean, the way you shoot for film is vastly different than how you shoot in studio or a studio in color film mix. All of these things were really interesting to my mind, and I'm sure to everyone else watching too. And then after you got through that special night of programming, the following week, you start up with the next story, which was Doctor Who and the Silurians. It was in black and white. And there was this little disclaimer on the bottom of the screen as the John Pertwee title sequence came up. And it basically said, we're not responsible for the fact that this is in black and white. That was what KTCA put up there. And it was kind of disappointing, but it was the first time we had ever seen in our market. And I keep saying it that way because every market in the Twin Cities was different, in America was different, because everyone was showing something different at that point. So it was, first time we'd seen anything in black and white, and I didn't understand why it was in black and white. Ambassadors of Death, that was in black and white, obviously. Inferno, back to color. Oh, well, we're done with black and white then. And then we get to Terror of the Autons. And Terror of the Autons, of course, is in black and white. Mind of Evil is in black and white. Then you go to some more colors, and then Demons was black and white. Another caveat to that, of course, is that when we got to Planet of the Daleks, they just omitted episode 3. When they got to Invasion of the Dinosaurs, they omitted part 1 completely. And all that stuff, I hate to say it, this is really embarrassing. I didn't miss episode 3 of Planet of the Daleks. I missed it completely. We showed it in movie version in the Twin Cities. We never got episodic John Pertwee episodes. So it's this big chunk of Doctor Who. And once again, as an 11-year-old, I should have been just like hanging everywhere. I missed a lot of stuff. It was very clear that some of this was just not quite ringing for me. So that was that's how that worked. And then Invasion of the Dinosaurs started with part 2. Just like, okay, we had seen enough at that point in this market of our PBS station cutting up Doctor Who stories to make them last longer, even though they're movie version. So sometimes they would just end and go to the end credits in the middle of a sentence. They would start up, 20 minutes earlier from the week before in the middle of a sentence. So just like, oh, okay, well, that's probably my PBS station. I didn't know. So what really changed things for me was, once again, I may have mentioned before, I wasn't part of organized fandom for quite some time, and I also didn't get Doctor Who magazine, so I didn't know what existed in the BBC archives. I totally did not understand how the archive worked. You know, like many of us probably back in the day, I just thought that they all existed, you know, and once we get to the Hartnell Trowns, that was very obvious that I was wrong about that. Here I'm thinking that for the Pertwees, they just decided not to shoot them in color. What do I know about anything? My goodness, once again, I'm 11 years old. Relax. So we get to, I get to 1988, and I am at a convention in St. Paul, Minnesota called Time Festival. We had John Pertwee there. We had Janet Fielding there. We had Fraser Hines there. It was the first time I'd ever seen really a bunch of Doctor Who stars in one place. It was magical, to be very honest. But I walked into a video room that they're showing Doctor Who episodes. And in the video room, they're showing something very familiar to me. And I'd seen it before. And it was the Demons. But it was in color. I had never, ever had seen anything like it. I didn't know it existed in color. It blew my mind. Why is it here in color, but Channel 2 doesn't show it in color? It doesn't make sense to me. And then as time went on, and I found people so that was July of 1988. By September and October of 1988, I started going to some local Doctor Who things, and what ended up happening was that I met people who had tapes, and that's what I really wanted. I wanted to start trading tapes because I wanted some of these things. I also wanted those orphan episodes of Doctor Who, and that's also for another time. So a friend who I became friends with through all this, he came over to lend me some tapes, and he started showing me some stuff. And one of them was The Ambassadors of Death in color. The other was Terror of the Autons. And he may have shown me Silurians. I don't remember. And I thought, once again, and once again, as a younger person, at that point, I was, 14 or something. Why, I don't understand why you just don't put in a VHS tape on a broadcast station and just run it. Like, why can't this run on Channel 2? It makes no sense. They're showing it black and white, and we have it in color. This is amazing. So obviously, it doesn't work that way. And then finally, I've started to understand what had happened. And that was, going back to 1972, as you all know, that Time Life in America got from the BBC the rights to 72 half-hour or 72 individual episodes of Doctor Who from the John Pertwee era, skipping Spirit from Space, starting with Doctor and the Silurians, and going to the end of the Time Monster. So those are all in color. And while those are being over here in color, the BBC was wiping their original masters. The BBC is wiping these tapes, and the color tapes for most of these John Pertwee episodes in NTSC, because don't forget in UK is PAL, over here in US and Canada is NTSC. Some of these NTSC 2-inch masters are surviving. But what about the ones that are not, that they don't survive? And that's where we find the sheer miracle of people who had what we call domestic home video recorders like Beta or VHS, but really it was Beta, wasn't it? Who were recording these color Pertwee episodes because either they liked them or someone like Ian Levine was getting in touch with them, finding out it's being run to record them off air. That's how we got Terror of the Autons from WTTW in Chicago. And, for the fact that this, of all the times that had played, and had played a number of times between 1972, 1977, we were lucky to get one recording, and one good recording of this. And what ends up happening is that this gets, sent around the world, to be honest, because this is the only color version of Terror of the Autons that exists. And so that version eventually comes to people like me via other people, that's the way that trading works, is that you have one master location and that these dubs are made all throughout time. So like the first time I got Terror of the Autons in color, in NTSC color, it was pretty horrible because it's been dubbed down so many times. And as we know, with VHS duplication, every time that you duplicate it, it goes down what we call a generation. And, look at Chex Lies and videotape, and you will see, exactly what they were talking about with an example from Revenge of the Cybermen on it. So that is, and it's so true. It is so true how that worked. And as a videotape collector, what I wanted to do was keep finding better and better and better quality copies. And that was, you just try to keep getting better and closer to the source. And eventually you get a little bit better. I remember one time a friend who had a better copy of Terror of the Autons, we played his in my machine and it looked really good. As far as good as something like that could be. And then he lent it to me. I dubbed it for myself, and you could already see quite a bit of deterioration of picture. That was disappointing because it's like, ooh, I think I have it. And there are certain shots that I always looked at because we got many copies of Terror of the Autons, and that was always the first shot looking into Circus, and you see that yellow and red poster, and if you started seeing wavy discolored lines going through it, you knew that you've gone too far and that you're not going to get a great color copy of it all the same. So the whole idea of these color Pertwees can merit its own special episode because there is so much that was going on getting that. And the person that I've always associated with the majority of the color recordings was a gentleman by the name of Tom Lundy. That was a name that I heard way back in the day. That Tom Lundy was the one who was recording, I always thought he was recording them. Other people say something else. And the reason why I bring it up, because I actually reached out to Tom Lundy and we had a conversation, and I wanted to actually do something where he could talk about these, because he worked with Ian Levine. Ian got all of his color copies, I think, apart from Demons at KCET in Los Angeles. I think he got them all from Tom Lundy. Tom doesn't want to talk about it anymore. Tom is very disillusioned with fandom, and his reasoning is that he feels like that nobody appreciates what he's done. And he says there's so much bickering as to where these color episodes came from, even though he maintains it comes from him, that he just is disillusioned, doesn't want to talk about it. And I think that's too bad. Like I said, his name was always associated with them when I was younger. And I hold a great amount of gratitude towards Tom and everybody else who had recorded these back in the day, because let alone the fact of what we have on home video, that they were enjoyable back in the day to be able to have these and watch them and share them. So, and in fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think fans at the Longleat celebration, the 20th anniversary Longleat celebration, got a real treat because Ian Levine was the one who programmed that day's video room, and he showed Terror of the Autons, and he showed it in color. And I can only imagine that everybody was very excited to see this story in color, especially since it only aired once in UK on its original transmission. And next time they would have seen a clip would have been in Who's Doctor Who, and that was a black and white clip. The next time someone almost had a chance to see it on UK terrestrial television was in 1999, or would have been probably 2000 by that point. BBC Two was doing the repeat season of Pertwee, and they got as far as Doctor and Silurians, and they ended up switching to Genesis of the Daleks, and then finally just completely canceling the season, because the thing that was interesting about it is that all of the episodes were being remastered at that point for broadcast. That's why we got a new transfer of Spirit from Space at that point, and a new restoration for Doctor and Silurians. We also had a new restoration for Terror of the Autons, which I don't believe really has ever been seen at that point, because then it was superseded by the DVD and now the Blu-ray. So stuff is really interesting. What Tom Lundy had and recorded around 1977 would have been Doctrine of Silurians. It would have been Terror of the Autons. It would have also been Claws of Axis and Day of the Daleks. Also the Curse of Peladon. But also he had recorded 6 minutes of the final episode of The Mind of Evil. I don't understand why it is the way it is. I mean, I heard stories like he recorded a football game over it or whatever it was. But, we had that. And for the longest time, that was pretty cool to see. 6 minutes kind of interspersed with the opening credits and going to other areas about it. And it was really, really pretty cool to see. It was... these were fun times. These were moments that we were really excited to be able to see something really rare. Also, the thing about like BBC, the BBC archive, especially when you read the book Wiped, it's a kind of a, if you want to be technical about the master tapes of Doctor Who and the film recordings and everything else, Wiped is very much the way to go to learn this stuff. And it's interesting because I forgot about this. They're always on the hunt for color John Pertwee tapes. And once again, to be clear, in North America, Time Life, who was the distributor at that point, did not have color 2-inch masters to Terror of the Autons. What we have this from, what we got the color signal from, would have been from the WTTW broadcast recording on a domestic videotape Betamax in 1977. And that's what we showed at the start of this, and which is a really good recording. This one is direct from the master tape, which is nice. Granted, it doesn't really matter anymore because it's been superseded, but I like having all of those versions. DWM number 80 had said that they had wrongly reported that both Terror of the Autons and Planet of the Daleks, the entire story, both entire stories, had been returned from ABC Australia. And that was just, that was back in the day. And we all know this, who have been watching for years and years and years. That's back in the day where there was a lot of misinformation about what was around, what existed, what was coming back. People were excited, people misunderstood. It's just how it went. So, unfortunately, there was no 2-inch videotape master for all 4 episodes of Terror of the Autons or episode 3 of Planet of the Daleks that were returned. Though, that being said, for episode 1 of Terror of the Autons, we do have a segment of Joe and the Doctor in the lab that was from 2-inch, and I think it was a 2-inch insert tape from Nationwide, if I'm not mistaken. If I am mistaken, you all let me know. I'm sure of that. So that was really interesting to see kind of where that goes. And that's not the first time we've had that sort of thing happen. One being also the idea that 10th Planet episode 4 was returned on Shabbat and tape, and there was a rush VHS release all ready to go for that. That's once again another story, but it's just another prime example. What's another example of misinformation? I don't know, the Omni rumor? Oh, well, we shouldn't be talking about that. We're only talking about VHSs here. I'm so sorry. We did talk about this story a little bit in my my blog from the archive at from-the-archive.co.uk. And what I talked about there was my dealings with trying to find color Pertwee episodes, going back and having a friend of mine who had worked with somebody at Time Life at the time, and going back and trying to piece together kind of where some of the stuff went in my mind, because at the time I was heavily involved with storing video elements and film elements, and knowing that maybe there's a possibility that perhaps not 2-inch tapes existed, but maybe U-matic tapes existed of some of these episodes. Maybe there's a storage place somewhere that people had forgotten about it does happen. In my line of work, it had always happened. And so I'd never really just thought that it was not the case. And we did a lot of work, did a lot of discussion with people about it. And unfortunately, obviously, it didn't work. But I chronicle that in an article called Missing You, and about different aspects of my dealings with missing episodes for what it's worth. One is not listed in there. It was more recent. But what it is, though, was just how things just look like they could work, but not work. And what I would love to do at some point, I talked with TJ Lubitsky, who is very active with Doctor Who running on PBS, and has a very much a lot of the information, if not all the information, about the color Pertwees in the 1970s here in the U.S. And it'd be probably a fun opportunity. Originally, I was going to have him on my podcast, but I think it'd be more interesting to make either a video or do a live stream, and maybe people could answer questions if he was up for it. It's a very interesting story, and even though I know a lot of people in UK tend to want to focus on the UK broadcast, the American broadcasts show a lot of unique pieces to it, and without the North American broadcast, we wouldn't have had a lot of these Pertwee episodes that had only existed in black and white up to a certain amount of time. So that is something that, we're certainly thinking about doing. Now let's talk about this. Let's talk about Terror of the Autons, which is, first of all, a story that I'd wanted to see out on video for so long. It was probably back, in 1992 or so, that we started to find out that there was some restoration work going on with these color Pertwees, or the Pertwee episodes to become color. And what's interesting about this, the first one being the Demons, and that was back, I think, 1992. You have the first attempt back in 1986 from Keith Hunter and Simon Anthony, who were the first to try to do what the restoration team did. And, there's so much out there in terms of what the restoration team did. And they weren't even officially the restoration team. They've also never been officially the restoration team. But what they did to do this, and I think what you take the color luminance and you're overlaying it on top of the black and white film prints, you have to do some work. So because the film prints are zoomed in a little bit when they're making a telerecording, so you're not getting the frame, you're not seeing the frame in the shot, because it's literally a film camera on a flat monitor that you're recording this stuff onto. And I think you're adding the color luminance to the recording. Now that's how it was done, if I'm even getting that right. How it was done back in started in the 80s, 86, and then in the early 90s. Now it's all different, with chroma dot recovery being a big part of it, and so much more happening to it. But this is what it was back then. And I actually reached out to Simon Anthony to see if by chance there was any clips he could send me of the work they did in 1986. Sadly, there wasn't. He did tell me how I could make it myself. I don't want to make it myself, but I do want to shout out to Keith Hunter and Simon Anthony, because it was it seems like that this was an idea going around a lot of people's head, because if I'm not mistaken, Lord Rafe Montague, and was doing something similar. Meanwhile, I think it was Steve Roberts was trying to do something similar, and then I think Paul Vanisis was brought in also. So, I mean, it was really kind of swimming around at some point to try to do these. And it was, the Demons was, I believe it was funded by The Late Show, and eventually got an actual proper airing. And then it got the go-ahead to do the rest of the Pertwees that they could do, and that all of them could be done. But the ones that they could do was obviously the Demons, Doctor and the Silurians, and Terror of the Autons. The ones that were problematic were the Ambassadors of Death, because it wasn't color all the way through. There was this horrible rainbow patterning in some of the episodes, a lot of the episodes actually, as well then as The Mind of Evil only had 6 minutes of color. You couldn't do that overlay on it. And of course, Planet of the Daleks and Invasion of the Dinosaurs Part 1 didn't exist in color at all. It was only black and white, so it'd have to be recolorized. Big problem, especially back then. And so DWM ran, first of all, they promoted that this was coming out, that these were coming out. And there was an article about colorizing these stories in DWM issue 199. And there was something really interesting that was said at the end of the article. When you're looking at it 30 years later, it's really kind of poignant in a way. And that was simply talking about the episodes that are problematic, the ones I just mentioned. And what it says in it is exactly what the future is for those two stories, Planet of the Daleks and Invasion of the Dinosaurs 1. The Mind of Evil and the semi-completed The Ambassador of Death remain unclear at the moment, but rest assured, work is being done to find ways of restoring them to their former glory. And what's really interesting about that, of course, is, and I know people will be like, well, Invasion of the Dinosaurs Part 1 isn't great. Ambassador of Death still is a bit of a problem. I look at it this way. I can now watch from Spearhead from Space to, and I was going to say Planet of the Spiders, but honestly, to the TV movie for the classic series range, all in color. I look at Invasion of the Dinosaurs, Invasion Part 1, and I do not look at it as like, oh, this isn't quite as good as the others. I love it. I am so grateful. I am so grateful that I can watch all those stories in color. My 14-year-old self, to be honest, I've always thought we would at some point, some way. And what excites me about that unofficial restoration team was simply this. They created new technologies for Doctor Who. They created it so Doctor Who could look as close to as it did back at the time of its original broadcast. So we have VidFire to give back the look of video. We have the chroma dot recovery. We had this color overlay to it. We've had so much that was created and now used on other releases that really did such a wonderful job. And of course, I don't mean to forget all the work on the audio side of it to make it sound as good as possible. And, that's the nostalgia for me, is the idea that, when I look at Terror of the Autons on VHS, released by BBC Video the first time, I was blown away by it. I will never forget thinking, this is amazing. The only thing that I thought I wished I would have been able to see it as, and I never thought that this could ever happen, was the original video look on the studio sequences, which of course now has been completely done. And the DVD and the Blu-ray, to me, are pretty much flawless. It's absolutely just a pleasure. It's like you're watching it from 2-inch videotape. It is absolutely wonderful. And I am so proud to see them do that. And that was so nice. DWB issue 112 in April of 1993 also promoted this. And it was a pretty big deal. This was really neat to be able to have these stories come out. And it was in the anniversary year, 1993. The tape itself, once again, this is another amazing Alistair Pearson cover. Absolutely amazing. You have, parts of it, you wonder if it's actually photographs. It's so cool. And the fact that for the Auton, the top of the Auton, that carnival mask, that he actually even keeps in the eye holes for the Auton to see out of, I guess. And then he has a little sticker on it that says, due to the archived nature of the material, the quality of the picture may vary occasionally. And, that's just like, tells me that this is something special, that, you know, we're not just going off the best masters, that this is something that was put together. And on the back, it tells us that originally transmitted in color, this 4-part adventure starring John Pertwee was lost in its original form. Only a black and white version and an edited color American NTSC standard version remained until now, when technology worthy of the Doctor himself has reconciled the two, synchronizing them into one full color version. I'm just going to be honest. I hate it when people say stuff like that, like worthy of the Doctor himself. He's fictional, okay? I get it. I'm a crab apple. I totally understand that. It is though, just like, and then, you know, even on the front, it says, for the first time since 1971, the full reconstructed color version. And you have the little paintbrush that you also have on the side here. And they're on all of the color Pertwee reconstructions, the other two, Doctor and the Silurians and the Demons. So, which is really, really unique. And then, of course, you have, because it's the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who that year, you have the special 30th anniversary logo. And, you know, as we're getting close to the 60th anniversary, my God, huh? It'd be interesting to see what their logo looks like. But this is always something kind of fun and special to me. I really do think that this is really neat. And on the inside of this case, a couple things. First of all, you have your tape, which we'll try not to break as we take it out. And then you have, and one of my favorite things is always showing all the stuff that was available on BBC Video, and this was for science fiction, right? So you have stuff like Blake 7 and Red Dwarf, Star Cops, Doomwatch, and of course Doctor Who. And as a young fan who had only really seen Doctor Who, Blake 7 did get a showing here. The idea that in another country, of course, I could buy Quatermass in the Pit. I could watch some Doomwatch. I could look at Star Cops, all these wonderful programs that I've heard of before, read about in other magazines, and never had a chance to see. I didn't know if I'd ever see them. I don't know about any of you in the U.S. I didn't know if I'd ever see them, and here I am, able to watch this stuff now, of course, and boy, it has taken over my entire house, my collection. But back then, the idea of like, oh, I'd do anything to watch some Doomwatch, and now you can, or anything to watch Quatermass in the Pit, and I've had a beautiful restored version on Blu-ray with film prints added, you know, the film inserts added directly back into it and stuff. Just amazing. And another thing that I was going to mention on the Tomb of the Cybermen video, which I thought was really fun, and you're not going to be able to see it, but the BBC logo is imprinted in the case. At the time, the cases were BBC cases. Like that's they took care of everything. So there's a logo right there for BBC, just says the BBC on it. A really nice touch, and as once again, as a young kid who loved everything BBC, it was really neat to have the logo on something, including the videotapes that these things came in on. Speaking of the videotape itself, this was amongst two other releases that really got me to decide I'm going to start collecting the PAL VHS of Doctor Who. And, you know, as I said in the last one, you know, I had Curse of Fenric, and I had then got Tomb of the Cybermen. But that was fine. Those were stopgaps, because I especially wanted Tomb of the Cybermen because I couldn't wait to watch it. Then on eBay one day, I saw this story and Silurians and Shada all on in one auction together, and they cost, I think, altogether $7, and this was in 1997, I believe. And so I thought, well, I'll get these. And Shada, the tape itself, still has the script book sealed, and I thought, you know what, if they only cost that much, I'm not going to have any issue with maybe I should collect them this way because they're beautiful in their cases, as I mentioned last time. You get the insert, you could take out the covers if you want and just look at them, and it's just a really classy presentation of the stories. If they only cost that much, why not? I'll find them on eBay one by one, and I'll just collect them over time. Not a big deal. Well, my God. That was expensive hobby. It really was. These are expensive tapes. These were rare tapes to get. I got a really good deal on them. I got others that were a really good deal on. Others, though, were expensive. Others I used Finder services to find these episodes. It was not easy to get these, and I do not regret one bit of it. But that's kind of the journey that we'll be talking about, is how I got these, and I want to know how you got them, because especially starting to collect these in 97, 98, after what we call the catalog purge, once the rebranding started and a lot of the old titles such as this were deleted from the catalog. Some of these became very, very difficult to find. So that took a lot of detective work, but in a way, that's what makes it fun for me. That's what makes it a lot of fun for me to do that. There aren't really any cuts to this, apart from one segment. I think it's 11 frames in episode 3, as the doctor tries to dissect that troll doll. There was an off lock on the VHS or the beta tape for the NTSC recording, and there was also something wrong with the film. I think the off lock was in the film, actually, from the 2-inch tape at the time of recording, and then it was also like the tape broke up, the picture broke up on the Betamax tape at the same time, and they tried to use new technology to be able to fix it. It didn't quite work. They had to cut out 11 seconds. I think it was better for the additional ones. To be honest, for the Blu-ray, I'm not quite sure. I'm sure it's been fixed. I'm sure technology's moved along enough. We don't get the articles anymore about the restoration. And I don't blame anyone. I mean, those were probably a lot of work to do. We loved them. We ate them up at the time, but I'm sure they're a ton of work for Steve to put together. So, it just, I remember watching, and for me, it's more like, did something happen that took me out of it? And nothing happened that took me out of it, to be honest. So, to be honest, it didn't even hear either. So they did a great job with it. And speaking of the restoration of this story, if you have a chance, go back and read some of those articles, especially the ones in the 90s. And the reason why is because we are all digital based now, aren't we? We do everything digital. A lot of us are armchair editors, and we try to do our own restoration on things, or we do new credits or whatever else. But I love reading those articles because at the time, everything was tape to tape. Literally, you take one tape and you copy it to another. You do everything you can to try to minimize generational loss. They were digital tapes, but they weren't. The workflow was not like a hard drive based. It was still going from tape to tape, and it was very interesting to watch. And the thing which was really interesting about the restoration to Terror of the Autons too, was that it was new 16 millimeter prints were struck for this, which I think now they just go back to the negatives if they have it. And the thing about the prints, they said that they wet gated them, and basically it's a solution that goes on the film that will cover up the dirts and scratches as best as it can, while it goes through. Well, stupid me, when they said it's wet gated and they have a solution that goes on the film prints, I thought you have this reel of film and you have the solution, and you take the reel of film and you put it into the solution and then you run it afterwards. Not that it kind of sprays onto the film lightly before it goes through the torch, which I think that's how it's done. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure you will. But I just thought you just throw the whole film into the solution. thank God I'm not working on this stuff. I would have ruined parts of the archive. I mean, this is why you got to keep me away from stuff. But it was very, isn't it great how a lot of us have learned something about television restoration, and that we were at a time felt like we were giving special access into how these wonderful things were being restored, how things were being recovered. And I get that we don't get that anymore, but certainly back in the day, that was pretty exciting. I loved it. It was a lot of fun to read about. And also, of course, Terra the Autons was the easiest of the Pertwees at the time to restore, simply because the color recording from WTTW was so good. In fact, they did not have to replace the closing credits for the episodes, and they ended up just doing the opening, remaking the opening. Of course, now that's a given. You do that. You do it for all of them, and I personally am all for it. I think it looks amazing. I love seeing the openings in their proper like color scheme and stuff, but really nice quality HD recordings of the opening credits. I love it. I think it's the best. But back then they were kind of more careful about that in terms of, do we have to do it? Do we not have to do it? And it was probably a lot harder to do it. I think that if I recall, if not for all those Pertwees, at least for some of them, that they actually had to print out the titles and then overlay it like they did back in the day onto the opening credits to get it as authentic as possible. Of course, now I think it's just, created in Photoshop or whatever and put onto the episodes. So it's a lot has changed over the time. The thing about Doctor Who for me is not only is Doctor Who itself from 1963 to 2021, it's a story of television production. We have seen pretty much every iteration of how television is made in the UK. Doctor Who has been a part of it. Doctor Who has been made that way. Perhaps with an exception of the later 90s into the early 21st century, but picking up in 2005, that's how television was made and went to HD. They played around with possibly 4K. This is how the history of television, and we watch it through Doctor Who. How stuff is restored and how it's done right is also represented by Doctor Who. A lot of people restore stuff. A lot of people do work on television programs. I'm not saying they're all doing it wrong, and Doctor Who folks are the only ones doing it right, but there is a standard that team had put together that nobody else has really attained to. And I mean, some stuff is really good that other people put out. But consistently, since let's not count the Pertwee stuff, since 1997, when the likes of the War Machines came out on VHS, since then it has been consistently just high level of trying to get this show to look as good as possible. And now the ones who are also doing a great job, and you have members of the Doctor Who folks involved with it, is the stuff with Network. Look at Monty Python's Flying Circus. That is stuff that truly really makes me excited and happy that we have this opportunity to see these wonderful programs that we love the way that, and quite honestly better than the way that they were originally transmitted. Just incredible. Back in the day, this was pretty special. To me, it's still very special. It's a version. I love versions of our favorite show. The way I look at it, I always have a master version and then other versions after that. Now the master version is the Blu-ray release. But so you have the VHS. It's, as good as it was back in the day, has been superseded. Now, of course, we also have stuff like the DVD, which was part of Mannequin Mania or whatever it was called, with Spirit from Space, some of those names. But so you have this DVD with with a brand new restoration of it. And it's a shame because Spirit from Space was released very close to each other as a new format. Because this was released with Spirit was released with this, then very shortly after, I think it was shortly after, it was released on Blu-ray. It was so good on DVD that the Blu-ray looked great, and it still looks great, but I was hoping for that wow factor, and that's where we got it, from the original release in 2000 to the release with this. So you have this, and then of course you have it on Blu-ray. And this was kind of surprising to me that this was tackled so early on in the Blu-ray, but I love it. And all the restoration done on it, including the Mind of Evil, was fantastic. My only concern is the boxing for this, because as you will see, my next video is going to be Trial of a Time Lord, and you're going to see what happens to these boxes. I'm not going to say because I didn't take care of them, because I take care of these, but I'm afraid to open these. I really am, because the plastic holding the trays inside seem to kind of come loose. They're absolutely beautiful, but I'm worried about their longevity. I wish that they could have been steel books, but because of the number of discs that house these, they can't do steel books. They don't have enough, they can only fit so many discs in them. And probably steelbook was never really an option. They just wanted to do this. And here they're trying to make something special, and I'm complaining about it. I appreciate the effort. Now you might be saying, well, Greg, there is the non-limited release that's coming out for these, and I appreciate that. But these they don't have the entire book that these do. What you have, if you got these, you don't have the full book that comes with it. That's a point I can't get past. Also, keep in mind too, I did get season 18 as the non-limited to go with my limited edition version, because I found out that they fixed Meglos in that with the misspelling, and even though I would have never caught it, I still want it to be right. So I ended up getting season 18 non-limited edition packaging, taking out the Meglos disc and replacing it into the limited edition. I have a problem. I'm fully aware of that. What we're going to do, why don't we take a look to see where we've come from. We're going to take a look at the three versions, and at the time of doing this, if I can do so, I'd also include the black and white broadcast version, but more than likely it's just going to be the DVD, the VHS, the DVD, as well as the Blu-ray. I only do that not because it's like, oh my god, these were horrible looking before. It's just, this is where we came from, because those VHS releases were pretty special regardless. So here's a look at a comparison of all of those versions.
I'm your new assistant.
Oh, no.
The Brigadier sent me along to introduce myself, Dr. Josephine Grant.
How do you do, Miss Grant?
This is a great release. I'm so glad to have it. We'll be talking about more from 1993, the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who. It was a very special year for video releases. I remember being very excited by all of the great stories that were being released, and how special it all felt. The whole thing felt very special. And this was a great big part of it too. Really thought that this was an amazing release, that we had the opportunity to do so. Also, it was so amazing even back in the day of broadcasts that it made the cover of the Radio Times. So I think everyone kind of thought this was something really great. With that being said, if you like me doing these, send me a note. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to know what you're thinking of these. Also, share with me in the comments of wherever you're watching this, or through email, as some of you have. Send me what you thought about this at the time. What did you think getting these? Was this special for you? Did you think that we'd ever get anything like this? And just send it, because I love reading what everyone else's experiences was, because that's just my experience. Some of you have been watching it for so much longer than I had, and been watching like a black and white version or really poor quality color versions that were recorded off PBS back in the day. All this stuff is very interesting to me. That's our shared history. That's what it's all about. And you know what? We just keep going. We just keep bringing out more videos. Lots to go through, right? We have a lot to talk about, and I think that we just keep the conversation going, and we keep talking about our favorite subject, Doctor Who.
And there are more space adventures on these BBC videos.